Hello, and welcome to today's web forum, Food Safety, Urban Farming, and Farm to School. Today we bring you the fourth in a series of Healthy Farms, Healthy People Farm to School Month web forums with a special focus on food safety issues. My name is Holly Calhoun. I'm the project coordinator of the Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition, which works to build cross-sector collaboration for policy reform that promotes the health of all Americans while strengthening the economic and environmental viability of the food and agriculture sectors. We are recording today's web forum and will make the archive available on our website at www.hfhpcoalition.org. Please share the link with interested colleagues, and I encourage you to check out the other web forums in our series, which will also be archived on the site. We will have time for Q&A at the end of today's web forum. So in order to submit your question, you can do so in the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We will respond to all the Q&A at the end of the web forum, but there's no need to wait. You can enter your questions as they come to you, and we'll be collecting those to pose to the panelists at the end. So I do want to make sure that everyone knows how to use the Q&A box. So let's go ahead and warm it up. And I will ask you a question and have you type in your answer. So today's question is, what is your favorite root vegetable? And we won't hold you to this years from now, but if you click in the right-hand corner, you can go ahead. I don't know, parsnips, that's a good one. Beets, carrots, wonderful. All right, good. So it looks like people know how to use the Q&A. Sweet potatoes, beets, delicious. Looks like some folks are also typing into the chat box, so that's good. So you can type into the chat to ask us questions, or if you have sort of a technical issue, you can type it into the chat for the general sort of Q&A. The best way is the bottom on the Q&A box. So now that everybody knows how to use that, I'm going to introduce our presenters. So today we will hear presentations on Colorado Farm to School Task Force supporting farm to school innovations by Lynn Kathleen of the Spark Policy Institute, Growing Food for Children in the Community by Meg Cayley of Sprout City Farms, Farming School Land So Local and Oh So Nutritious by Ann Wilson of Denver Public Schools, and Ensuring Food Safety, the Role of Evaluation by Lynn Kathleen of the Spark Policy Institute. Here are the faces behind the voices that you'll be hearing from today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Lynn Kathleen.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Holly. So welcome, everyone. We're very excited. This is actually the last in the series that we've been involved with the Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition, and we're very grateful for this opportunity to share all the amazing things that we have been involved in. Today, I wanted to give background about what the Colorado Farm to School Task Force is doing, because the work that they're doing has been so fundamental to moving Colorado forward, as well as creating a lot of national resources. Next slide, please. The Farm to School Task Force was legislatively mandated in 2010 through the Farm to School Healthy Kids Act and was reauthorized this last legislative session to be continued indefinitely. However, I should mention that the task force actually sees as their job to actually end themselves, because they know once they are ready to end, it means that Farm to School has been successfully and sustainably implemented across Colorado, and so that is their goal. One of the opportunities that really came with their original legislation was that unlike a lot of legislative task force or advisory councils, this task force was given and mandated to do very hands-on work. So while they do have the mandate to make recommendations and advise on policy, they also have the mandate to identify, provide, and design training materials for farmers and ranchers and food service directors, to provide assistance to school food services to help them establish processes that will help use locally grown food, to advise school districts on farm to school, including their facility and equipment needs, to offer assistance directly in developing whatever kinds of hands-on help that they need, and to develop a statewide data collection plan so we can really track what's going on. Next slide, please. The task force is made up of 15 appointed members. We have 4 school food service directors, 3 from K through 12 and 1 from higher education. We have a K through 12 principal or teacher seat, 1 nonprofit seat that is engaged in farm to school or local food systems, 4 state agencies. These are our Public Health Department, our Department of Agriculture, our Department of Education, and our higher education. And then we have 4 producer industries, and currently those are the Colorado Potato Administration, the Colorado Beef Council, Western Dairy Association, and Fresh Pack Produce, which is a distributor, and then 1 producer who's currently selling to a school district. Spark Policy Institute, for which I work, is the staff support to the task force. Next slide. The task force began with the task force gets no state funding, I should just mention. We began with a federal stimulus grant in 2010. Year 2 funding came from the Colorado Health Foundation in partnership with the Colorado Foundation for Public Health and the Environment. We have also received funding through the National Network of Public Health Institutes and Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition for our food safety work. And then just recently we have landed 2 3-year grants, one from the Colorado Health Foundation and the other from the Gates Family Foundation. We're very grateful for the amazing support that our foundations give the task force in their work. Next slide. I want to briefly go through the kinds of things that the task force does, and this is how they are able to really support and help the districts and producers grow farm to school. We do a lot of what we call toolkits. So for example, we like to provide model language and guidance on how to apply for grants. We have a grant toolkit that has 3 parts to it. One part is how you locate a grant to really figure out where you should get it so it meets the needs you're trying to do. The second is how you decide if that grant is really appropriate for you. And the third is what we call a template of a lot of boilerplate language, a lot of good resources you can cite to show that, why it makes sense for your school district to get that grant, as well as where you can get data about your school district to really write it in there, and then advice on how to make a compelling proposal. We do that because we have a lot of small school districts. So our largest school districts typically have the staff to be able to write those grants, but our small districts simply do not. And so in order to help them move forward and get the kind of equipment they need in their school kitchens, for example, to be able to process fresh fruits and vegetables, we have provided this toolkit. We also have an evaluation toolkit, which we are rolling out all across Colorado, and we hope to be doing a course in the upcoming Farm to School or Farm to Cafeteria conference in Austin in April, so look for that. And then, of course, we have the Food Safety Project, which we have talked about earlier in another webinar. Next slide. The task force is dedicated to creating user-friendly resources. For example, in our food safety project, in addition to the policy analysis and briefs, we created Prezi interactive presentations, one for food service directors and one for producers, that introduce the key food safety issues and provide links to resources. We also have a webinar series, and sometimes our series we do ourselves, and a lot of times we actually piggyback with partners. And so this series with the Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition is a good example of partnering on webinars, as well as we have partnered on a lot of webinars with Live Well Colorado. All of our webinars are archived, and so they are available after the fact. And then we also have created a self-assessment tool for food service directors. We actually affectionately called this Choose Your Own Farm to School Adventure, because it really reflects that there are many ways to start and expand farm to school. So we'd like to say there's no wrong way to start farm to school, and this particular toolkit actually is a really great way for food service directors to figure out where they can start and really make a difference as they move towards farm to school. Next slide. The task force also undertakes policy, legal, and regulatory analysis to identify trends, opportunities, and barriers to implementing farm to school. We do a lot of this, again, in partnership. So with partnership with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, we conduct, for example, annual 50-state scans on farm to school and healthy school food legislation. We put out friendly and accessible formats on federal and state regulation, which can oftentimes be not very friendly or accessible. And so we put these out, for example, in what we call our FAQs, so frequently asked question type of format. And we did this on the new USDA geographic preference option, both one for producers and one for food service directors. And we also undertake area-specific projects as requested by communities. Next slide. We offer a lot of outreach and technical assistance. In particular, this year we're able to offer what we call the Intensive Technical Assistance Workshops. We're doing this for the next 3 years under a generous grant through the Great Gates Family Foundation and support from the Colorado Health Foundation. We also have an Ask an Expert forum and a Colorado Farm to School blog where we share what's going on around the state. And we have been rolling out what we call our Colorado Farm to School champions, and actually one of the presenters today is one of our champions, and she's shown right there, and that is Meg. And we do that because we really want people to realize that Farm to School is so much a grassroots effort. So while this is a statewide task force, the reality is it happens by those people who are on the ground. And we really want to celebrate and get the news out and the stories out about them to inspire others to do the same. Next slide. We have lots and lots of resources. I encourage you to go to what we call our information hub, but it's just our website, and you will see a link to that at the end in this slide presentation. We have lots of resources on that website, and we have a e-newsletter which you can also sign up for. One of our most popular downloads, besides the policy documents that we do, is a wonderful set of school cookbooks that we created. One was actually for food service directors, and the other is for families. And both of these use local produce that we can grow here in Colorado, but a lot of that would be applicable to many states. Next slide. And the last thing I want to say really about the Colorado Farm to School Task Force is that they support the innovative projects that are happening around Colorado. There's an amazing project happening down in southeast Colorado, a food hub that is being designed in a correctional facility / veterans hospital that was recently closed down. We also are very much a partner and supportive and do what we can to help the amazing Greeley Central Kitchen Food Hub that is being rolled out up in our eastern plains right off of the Front Range. And then the Denver Public Schools Farming Project. We are so excited about this. It's an amazing and innovative project, and you're going to get to hear a lot about that today. Next slide. Since 2010, when the task force arrived, and this is actually a map that only goes through December 2012, but the task force in that time has, in partnership with all of the amazing things that are happening out there, we have seen Farm to School grow threefold in those 3 years. And so we went from 22 districts doing some type of Farm to School in 2010 to 64 of our districts by the end of 2012. And next slide. This is simply a heads up that you can sign up to get our Farm to School updates. While you may not be in Colorado, you may find many of the things that we're doing in Colorado to be very applicable to what you're doing, as we do roll out a lot of resources that are much more than just Colorado. So I encourage you to sign up for those. And with that, next slide, please. I will introduce and have Meg take over. Thank you.
Okay, well, my name is Meg Cayley, and as everyone said, I work with an urban agriculture nonprofit called Sprout City Farms. So we can go to our first slide there. The mission of Sprout City Farms is to cultivate urban farms on underutilized land, rooting community farms in the city, and bringing good food to neighborhoods. And really what we envision is a network of community farms all over the city. We're based here in Denver, so we're envisioning this throughout the Denver metro area. And these farms would serve the needs and wants of their particular communities, but be connected through the network of the local food system. So that's what we are striving to build. You can go to the next slide. And these are kind of our core values. So I just wanted to give everybody a little snapshot of Sprout City Farms as an organization before we kind of dive into more of the focus of the topic for today. So our core values really are healthy food access, education, participation, and awareness, and ecological stewardship. So we try to keep these in mind with all of the projects that we build. And we really believe that a thriving local food system is the foundation for healthy, resilient communities. So developing healthier individuals, families, and communities, and educating people, getting them involved in the process of growing food and understanding where their food comes from, and then also reconnecting back to the land and food that sustain them, we think are all really important in building our local food system and getting everyone involved. Next slide. So a little bit of the history of the Denver Green School Community Farm. This is our pilot project that we have been working on since about late 2009. We worked out a partnership with the Denver Green School, and then we broke ground. We took about a year to work out the partnership, and then we broke ground in the spring of 2011. So right now we're finishing up our third season at the Denver Green School. And the Denver Green School is a neighborhood public school within Denver Public Schools. So we have a partnership with the school itself that lines out the roles and responsibilities of the school and of Sprout City Farms. And in addition to that, we have a partnership with the school district as a whole. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the Denver Green School really is the first school within DPS that is kind of focused on teaching the concepts of sustainability. And so it was part of their founding mission to grow as much food as they could on their school property for their cafeteria. So they were looking for a group to help them realize that goal. And that was right about the time that we were getting our thoughts together about farming in the city. So like I said, we worked out a partnership with them, and we run a 1-acre farm that's in the southeast corner of the schoolyard. So it's a really great picture to be able to walk across the playground and arrive at a 1-acre farm. So we're there in the corner of the schoolyard, and it's really grown by leaps and bounds over the last 3 years. We started out with just a kind of pretty dismal-looking bluegrass field and have turned it into pretty much a thriving oasis over the last couple of years. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a little bit more about what we had to do to get this project started. So at the time in 2009, 2010, when we were developing the partnership, this was really the first project of its kind in the state of Colorado, where there was a large-scale farm on the grounds of a school that was growing food for the school cafeteria. And it's really one of the few in the nation, actually. They're really spreading like wildfire, but it's still kind of getting going. And since there was no precedent for that kind of project, we had to develop all of these documents. So, you know, the partnership agreements with Denver Green School and Denver Public Schools were really important. We had to work out a land use agreement with the school district that would allow us to occupy the land and grow food there. We have to, you know, have different insurance policies and things like that that allow us to do that. The school district does provide the land and water for free in exchange for the services that we provide. And then the food safety and handling protocols, which I think everyone is probably really interested in. We partnered with DPS Food and Nutrition Services along with a lot of other groups to bring those to fruition. So to be able to grow food on the school grounds on a large scale and harvest it and take it into the cafeteria, took a lot of paperwork. We worked with food safety experts from CSU Extension in Fort Collins, the Department of Public Health and the Environment, the Department of Agriculture, and we used guidelines from GAP and GIP standards, so good agricultural practices and good handling practices, and then USDA kind of guidelines, and then also folks had sent me a lot of existing plans from school garden projects around the country, specifically in Maryland and Oklahoma and Hawaii had really kind of detailed food safety plans. And so we pulled all those resources together to develop our food safety and handling protocols, which was really important, and we've been happy to be able to share that with other groups from around the nation that are interested in setting up a project like this. So that was really good. And through this USDA grant that we're working on right now with food services, we're going to make those even more robust, we think. And there is a video that talks a little bit about this that's on the Sprout City Farms website, which I think will be made available later as a resource. And another thing about the food safety and handling protocols is that it was really nice to be able to build on some momentum that's been growing around the country in regards to school garden projects. So even within DPS, there were already harvesting guidelines for students working in their school gardens and harvesting produce and taking it into the salad bar on the cafeteria. So it was nice to be able to start with this momentum that had been building, and we're just growing on a larger scale, so we had to kind of vamp up everything. But the work that Slow Food Denver and Denver Urban Gardens have done with Denver Public Schools was really great that that was already going. We just kind of built off of that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So these are just two pictures to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of where we started and where we are now. The one on the left is right after we started tilling the soil in April and May of 2011, that first year. And the picture on the right is about that same view from the roof of the school in August of this year. So it's a lot greener and more filled in now. And like I said, we're in our third season now, at the end of our third season. And we've been building it slowly over the years with the help of the community. The first year when we got started, we actually didn't even have a fence that separated us from the playground. And now we've got, all of our perimeter fencing. We've got lots of tool sheds and storage areas. We've got a wash station for when we're preparing everything that's been harvested before it's delivered anywhere. So we're building out the site. And we don't have our total numbers in yet from this year because we're still harvesting. We're not at the end of our season yet. But last year we were able to grow over 12,000 pounds of food here at the farm, and that puts us at a total so far from the beginning to about now of having produced over 30,000 pounds of food for the school and the community, just from what was a grass field before. So we're pretty proud of that. And I'll talk a little bit now about what else we do on the school grounds. So we can go to the next slide. Here's another picture of a different view of the farm. You can see some of our sheds there. There's a yellow shed and a red shed. So we have a little bit more of a headquarters. And it's kind of difficult to see, but you can see the school building in the background there if you look. Okay, the next slide. So these are just some things that I like to point out to folks when we are talking about urban farming versus rural farming. It's definitely not your grandma's farm. So being in an urban setting, we face a lot of issues that can be viewed as both challenges and opportunities at the same time. So land and water access is a huge one. Land and water in the city are very expensive. And that's partly why Sprout City Farms decided to go the nonprofit route to really create a lot of collaborations and partnerships with other groups around town that could help us realize the acquisition of land and water. So we're very fortunate with Denver Public Schools that they're willing to provide the land and water for free, because that takes a huge cost off of our shoulders. Proximity to neighbors is very different from being in a rural environment. We actually at the Denver Green School share 2 of our large fence lines with residential homeowners. So we are literally in folks' backyards. And that's great because on the one hand we can chat with them over the fence about what's for dinner that night when they come to pick up their veggies from the farm. But it also means that we have to be incredibly respectful of the space that we share, and really maintain compost piles and things like that. Keeping things tidy because we have tons of people coming through the farm all the time just to come and visit. It's really become to be treated a lot like a park, where people will just come and take a stroll around, sit on the bench, and watch the birds and the squirrels for a while. So the community aspect of it is really huge. I think there's a lot of folks who are happy to have that kind of access to a food production farm. They could hop on a bus or get on their bike and ride over here, whereas a lot of other farms that are in more rural areas are a lot more removed and harder to get to. So the access issue for visitors is pretty great. And in addition to folks just coming to visit, we have volunteer days as part of our programming, and we typically get about 400 to 500 individual volunteers coming out to help on the farm every year. So really a lot of people moving through. And then public outreach and communication has to be a real focus of our programming as well, because we are in people's backyards and we need to communicate with everyone effectively about what's going on the farm. We've established a Denver Green School Community Farm Advisory Board that's built up of parents and neighbors of the school who are just more interested in helping us grow the programs that we provide, because we want to make sure that we're really meeting the needs and wants of the community that we're serving. And so the advisory board is a great way for people to be directly involved in steering the programs that are offered on the farm and giving really good feedback about what they've seen so far and what they would like to see in the future. So those are kind of some of the things that really make this a lot different than running a rural farm where you're out in the middle of nowhere and doing your own thing. So next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we do and where the food goes. So as far as food distribution, we have 4 main points that we provide produce to. And we are a pretty diversified operation. We grow over 170 different varieties of fruits, veggies, and herbs at the farm. And that provides produce to the Farm to Cafeteria program. So there's about 500 students at the Denver Green School, and we're able to provide produce to them the last couple of years, about 7 out of the 9 months of the school year. So we can't meet year-round demand right now. We don't have a lot of great season extension practices in place, and there's some challenges with access to water in the winter and things like that. But during the harvest season, we try to get as much food in there as we can. So that's the Farm to Cafeteria program. And then we also run a community-supported agriculture program, better known as a CSA. We have about 80 families from the school and the neighborhood who buy shares in the farm in the spring, and then they come to the farm once a week, every week, to pick up whatever's being harvested. So they always get a share of the harvest every week from about June to October. And that's a great way for everyone to get involved in the farm and really learn about seasonal availability of produce. We always have folks that are new to the program who might be asking for tomatoes in June, for example, and they're not usually ready to pick until late July, early August. So, you know, we can always use those moments to teach folks about when things are seasonal, and that helps them in their other shopping, in their other food shopping activities, just learning about what's going to be the freshest, when, and you know, what's going to be best for their families at any given time of year. So the CSA is really fun. And then we do a weekly neighborhood farm stand, which this year we rolled out a new program for, kind of akin to Denver Urban Gardens Youth Farmers Markets program that they run. So the 6th grade class at the Denver Green School helped us run our farm stand this year, which was super fun for the kids. And it was great to see students leaving school at the end of the day and going to buy an apple or a bunch of carrots at the farm stand because their friends were running the farm stand, and that was the cool thing to do. We always like seeing the passion kind of flare up in the kids. So, so the farm stand is a really great way for students to interact with their community and feel connected to all kinds of people inside and outside of their school. And then we do donations. So we donate at least 10% of what we grow every year to local community organizations, emergency food relief programs, things like that. This year we worked predominantly with a group called Project Worthmore, who works with recently resettled refugee families from Burma and Nepal. So we try to give away a significant portion of our harvest every year to the folks who need it the most. So next slide. So we'll just kind of zip through these. I just wanted to give everybody a couple of pictures of these different programs. So for the Farm to Cafeteria program, and Ann will talk a lot more about this, they use the farm produce in cooked meals as well as on the salad bar. So it's really great that the kids have different options to eat farm fresh food. And I think she'll talk more about it too, but we've been working with interns from Johnson & Wales at the local cooking school to develop some recipes for DPS kitchens so that they can use more of what we grow, some of the kind of odder things like cooking greens and winter squash and root veggies. So next slide. There's just a picture of one of our CSA pickups. So we have folks that live in the neighborhood that are parents at the school who can come over every Wednesday afternoon and get a big old shopping bag full of veggies. Next slide. There's just a picture of the farm stand and our youth farm interns helping me sell stuff at the farm stand. And it is a donation-based farm stand. I think I forgot to mention that before. Next slide. And there's a picture of some of the families with Project Worthmore picking up their veggies every week. So next slide. And then one more quick snapshot about everything else that we do. So we talked about where the food goes, but being a nonprofit focused on community building, we do a lot of outreach and education programs. So obviously being on school grounds, it would be great for the kids to come out for classes. So we've hosted classes regularly for students from preschool all the way up to 8th grade at the Denver Green School for the last 3 years. And we're continually developing curriculum with the teachers to make it easier for them to bring their classes out. And that's another little piece of the Food Nutrition Services grant that was awarded this year, is really developing curriculum that's to DPS standards for, say, math and science, for example, so that it can be even more integrated into the classroom. And then during summer vacation, we now do a farm camp for kids so that they can really have a connector from what happens between spring and fall, because it's kind of odd that for learning about growing things in the garden, kids are here right at the beginning and then they leave and they don't come back until everything's all big and tall, and it's sometimes hard for them to make that connection that those were the seeds that they put in the ground in May. So, so farm camp is a way to help tie in those two ends of the school year for them out in the farming garden. And then we host lots of farm tours and field trips, classroom visits from other schools. We also go into classrooms at other places if they want to host us, do a lesson. We do an adult workshop series on topics of sustainable living in the city. So we had workshops this year on building a compost bin and conserving water, and you know, how to take care of chickens and all kinds of things like that, pickling and fermenting to preserve the harvest. And then I mentioned the volunteer days. We have those twice a week, every week, for folks to just come out and drop in and help with what we're doing. We have a seasonal internship program that helps staff the labor needs of the farm, and obviously it gives a lot of hands-on experience to young college graduates and young folks who really just want to learn a little bit more about farming and food. And then cooking classes and demonstrations to help tie it back for folks. That's the challenge with vegetables, is you can't always just eat them as they are. They need to be prepared in some way. So really tying it home and helping the nutrition education continue in the home kitchen is great through the cooking classes. And then we do some fun events too, like weed dating. It's kind of like speed dating, but you pull weeds on the farm. And we do a dinner outside on the farm every year. We do a film series. This week we've got our Halloween Harvest Fest coming up. So we just try to do lots of things for the community so they can come and hang out on their neighborhood farm. So next slide. And these are just some pictures again. So Holly, if you want to just scroll through those, that's fine. So that's a little snapshot for you guys of Sprout City Farms and how we got started as an urban agriculture nonprofit. And I know Anne's going to talk mostly about a kind of different model that they have with DPS. So not to be confusing, but we have kind of this more community-based model. And what Anne's going to talk about is more of a production-based model. So there's kind of two ideas going with the school district about how to co-locate farms on school grounds right now. So that's what we do.
Great, thanks, Meg. This is Ann Wilson with Denver Public Schools Food Nutrition Services Department. I serve as a farm-to-school coordinator, but I'm also a registered dietitian, and I supervise schools in the district. Next slide. So our district is the largest currently in Colorado, but we're smaller than some nationwide. 72% of our students qualify for free and reduced price meals, and we have quite a significant population of English language learners within our district. We do offer breakfast and lunch. Over 44,000 lunches are served in our district daily, and over 24,000 breakfasts. This is as of last year. Our breakfasts are going up daily. Our district is similar to some in that we do prepare the food on site. We do not have a central kitchen, so in every school where there is kitchen facilities, we prepare the food there, we cook, we bake, and do cold food preparation, wash produce, etc. Staff is trained so they can utilize the equipment in their kitchens on the culinary arts of cooking, baking, and cold food prep. They do 3-week-long classes after work, and so they learn about all those techniques with our chef in the district, Adam Fisher, who does a great job. And another advantage that we have, which is really exciting, is we have salad bars at the school, and you saw the one at the Green School with Meg's beautiful cherry tomatoes, and that allows us to highlight farm produce raw as well. One of the fun things or interesting things that we were able to do with Colorado Health Foundation grant is we were able to really look at our district land and how it was being used. This was done through a feasibility study, and it was really looking at available land in the district. We had wonderful garden to cafeteria programs at many of our schools, and we wondered, could we take that model of garden to cafeteria and expand that to a larger model at more schools in the district. And really, we wanted to see if that model would be economically viable, so we looked at the economic aspect. We also looked at how much it could supply our district, how much fruits and vegetables we could get if we grew produce on our own land. One of the advantages our district has as well is many of the elementary schools have what's called a learning landscape, and this is a schoolyard that really looks at building physical activity and social skills in kids. And so when these learning landscapes were installed, they did look at farms as well, installing those on the school grounds. And there is a link at the bottom of that slide if you're interested in checking out the feasibility study I'm talking about. So school farms are really just kind of a new thing for Denver too, but it's been really exciting as Meg described their wonderful community farm at the Green School. And the feasibility study, we really wanted to see if we could expand it to schools across the district. So with the feasibility study, they actually did some mapping of the available land at the district, and they found that there was 97 acres of vacant land. And then on school grounds, there's 47 acres of land that really wasn't being utilized to its full potential. So in order to determine that, they looked at the community's use of the land, they looked at what was needed for PE or athletics, and also for recess. Some schools use quite a bit of their land for recess. And then we looked at legal implications of doing this, as well as, you know, how feasible it would be economically. So one of the things, of course, that we had to address, we couldn't just farm all this land. We had to figure out how to handle the produce. So with what Meg described with her community farm at the Denver Green School is a really wonderful model. She literally walks it from the farm, you know, a couple steps to the back door to the kitchen, and, you know, then they accept it and wash it and all of that. With, if we had expanded to other school farms with a more of a contract farmer model, the produce would actually be delivered to our central warehouse where we could distribute it district-wide. And then another piece of the feasibility study was looking at processing. You know, we have some capability to process, but for things like zucchini, when it's growing so well as it has in the last few years, we needed to look at other ways to process and freeze items. So some of the benefits and the reason this feasibility study was conducted is it allows us to offer organic produce, which we tend to not be able to do because of the cost, and we also get a lot fresher product. Obviously, when Meg's walking that produce from the Green School to the back door of the kitchen, that's picked that day. It's very fresh. Another reason this feasibility study was conducted, as Meg mentioned, prior to the Denver Green School Farm being there, it was Kentucky bluegrass. And so that uses a lot of water. That's a very water-intensive plant. So if we looked at converting it to something that we could actually use to benefit our district, that's wonderful. And then it's also being more green. Less water is a smarter way to manage our resources, especially in an arid climate as we are here in Colorado. So with the school farms and the feasibility study, 2 farm types were looked at, and these are the 2 farm types that we're working with currently. Obviously, as Meg described, the Denver Green School Farm is very community-based, and it's a nonprofit model. Another model that we're exploring and working with currently is a contract farmer, so we actually select that contractor through our RFP process. One of the nice things with the farms that we've been able to work with that we can't always control with farmers, our other local farmers, is we can work with these farmers and say what we want to be planted, what we need, what we use on a weekly basis, and really work with the farmers on planting those items. We can also work with the farmer to look at things that if we don't have processing capabilities, maybe not work with those items, but for items that we can process, and we have had the opportunity to work with Greeley to help us process zucchini, which is really exciting, you know, planting some of those, as well as looking at what we can store. So if we do have surplus, it's just enough to be processed or it'll go out the next day. Another part of this project is really working with farmers prior to planting to make sure they're planting what we really need, and then developing farm safety plans, and we'll talk more about that next. So back to the feasibility study, the findings on just 18 acres of our land, we could meet almost half of our district's produce needs in season. So this is not talking about our needs in December through May. This is more our needs from August to November. Another thing that the feasibility study found was that we really have need to look into processing in order to utilize the farm produce year-round. And we don't currently have those processing capabilities, but we do have good partners like Weld County Schools here in Colorado that do have a fabulous central kitchen that can help us process and do some season extension. So starting in 2011, thanks to the Denver Green School, we had an opportunity to start piloting purchasing produce from farmers that grew food on our school grounds. So in order to make this successful, we found out that summer we had to have a food safety plan in place, and that was really important to get the project going and to make sure that it would continue. We had a wonderful garden to cafeteria protocol, and our health department really helped us with that, as well as Slow Food Denver. So our protocol had to address, just like any other GAP sort of plan, growing. We had to look at practices with harvesting, the transportation of the farm produce. Obviously with Meg, she's walking it across the school grounds, so that's not a huge part of her protocol, but for the contract farmers, it's being transported from the farm to our central warehouse. And even though it's only 4 to 8 miles, depending on the site, it's still something that we have to look at. So I have our resources there that we utilized, and we also had some partners review our protocols, and these protocols are still in development with the help of CSU Extension and our USDA Farm to School grants. We're very excited for that. So when we developed the protocol, we really wanted to minimize the risks as much as we could. We decided that we really didn't want to go the raw manure route. There's so many risks with that. Any compost had to be properly aged. One of the advantages we had in our developing our protocol was that we could only have access to city water, so we don't have to worry about surface water or anything like that, or a well. Another thing was we really wanted to exclude domestic animals from the farm site to make sure that there was no contaminants from those sorts of things. Soil tests had to be performed every year. Worker health and hygiene was a huge part of our protocols. And then if any staff was applying pesticides or herbicides, we wanted them to be trained so there would be no risks associated with that. So one of the things that we looked at in our protocols is we really looked closely at site preparation for planting, of course maintenance of the site, and preparing for harvest. We had to look at how the equipment that was used for harvest, as well as the containers that the produce was going to be stored in, was clean and sanitized, and how that was documented. Hand washing for employees. The bins that the produce goes in had to be easily cleanable. That was very important. Hygiene obviously is extremely crucial when we're talking about harvesting from farms. And then we also had some language around disposable harvest gloves. That's not used at all our sites, but to make sure that we were considering those things. So again, with field washing, we have an advantage. We have Denver city water, so only potable water could be used. The wash bins that were used for washing the produce, and then also the bins for produce storage, had to be cleaned and sanitized prior to use and putting the produce in them. And then there were some protocols for different items. Obviously, leafy greens had to have several rinses, and wash water had to be changed frequently. Root vegetables, had to be scrubbed. And then the final produce in the container had to be labeled with the date that the produce was harvested, what farm site it was harvested at, how many pounds were harvested, and the lot number. And this is particularly important for our produce coming from the farm sites that's going to be distributed from our central warehouse. So this is part of our traceability. So again, with the transport, and I talked about this, the Green School, Meg delivers the produce from the farm, walks, I don't know, 100 steps maybe to the back door of the kitchen, and then with the contract farmer, the produce is delivered to our central warehouse where it's sent to schools district-wide. So really with less for Meg and more for the contract farmer, there's a checklist that address proper cleaning of the vehicle that's transporting the produce to us, and also, you know, the employees that are delivering the produce have to have good personal hygiene, and with our biosecurity guidelines, they actually have to check in and show ID when they deliver as well. The kitchen also has procedures for handling this wonderful farm produce on school grounds. The kitchen has to inspect the produce to make sure that it meets basically U.S. #1 standards. When it's delivered to our warehouse, they'll check that, but like at the Green School, and Meg is very aware of the standards as well, so the kitchen manager really doesn't have too much to do because Meg's already done that for her. But when it comes to our central warehouse, it is inspected to make sure that it meets U.S. #1, and we check that out to the letter. If we have a situation where the produce is hail damage, for example, we'll work with CSU and a processor to utilize that produce if we determine that it's able to be processed and used in a cooked application. The produce then must be thoroughly scrubbed, and this was really important working with the health department. We had to have vegetable prep sinks. They had to be properly cleaned and sanitized. Once the produce has been rinsed in the produce sink, then it has to be re-rinsed and drained and put in a food-grade container, stored in the fridge overnight, and then it's ready to be washed as per our HACCP plan. We have standards for washing produce. Next slide. Okay, so just to wrap up, current goals for our farm project, we really want to develop a standardized food safety, standardized procedure for these farms district-wide with standardized protocols. We also want to really examine the farmers' protocols and make sure that we've utilized current research and best practices in those. We will also do a site assessment, sort of a checklist for the district, that's me, that I can go out and visit the farms and make sure they're following these protocols twice a year. Another part of our USDA Farm to School grant is looking at a standards-based curriculum where we can really bring that farm into the classroom so they can use it for standards that meet, or use it to meet literacy standards, science standards, things like that. And then the last part of the grant is we really want to make sure that we're utilizing as much of that farm produce as we can, and that includes developing recipes, working with the farmers on planting and when it's harvested, so we have as close to 100% utilization as we can. And so I think this is my last slide, but just in time, we have 3 farms, and Meg talked a bit about the Denver Green School. Again, it's a nonprofit farm, and they do provide a significant amount of produce to the Denver Green School kitchen. A lot of the vegetables in season come from the Green School. She talked about how the CSA piece of that, and really Meg is, there's not a lot of full-time staff, so Meg really relies a lot on the help of volunteers to make this work, and really does a great job with them. And then the other 2 farms that we have are at Bradley Elementary and Schmidt Elementary, and that's farmed by a contract farmer, Produce Denver. We pay them as a district, as a contractor, and then all the produce has to go back into school meals. So last year it was about 16,000 pounds that we got from 2 sites, And we already talked about how that produce then is brought back to the central warehouse and distributed across the district. And that pretty much wraps it up for me. Sorry, Lynn, I hope you have enough time.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Meg. So I'll just do this real quickly. As part of the Denver Public Schools USDA Farm to School grant that Ann had talked about, where they're rolling out these new pilots with contract farmers and the food safety protocols that are being developed and expanded upon from what they had before. The other thing that we're doing and Spark Policy Institute is taking the role of doing the evaluation of this development. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the evaluation is really pretty simple. It's to assess the effectiveness of the farm coordinator and technical assistance on improving farm safety, which of course is so critical as this food is going directly into our children's mouths. Next slide, please. We're really looking at three what I would call outcomes that we are focused on. So while we've had food safety protocols in place since 2011 when Sprout City Farms began growing at the Denver Green School, the expansion of the project to include contract farmers who will be farming small acres across the school district really requires the development of a standardized food safety protocol that is applicable to all the Denver sites. And as Meg had alluded to, urban farming is really right in the middle of neighborhoods, and particularly farming on school grounds is right in the middle of neighborhoods, and that presents its own interesting challenges and opportunities. It's also important to understand the process of the technical assistance that's being implemented in these pilot projects, and for us to be able to make recommendations for what worked and what could be improved. And then finally, understanding the barriers and incentives for the future additional farmers to grow food on Denver's land will ensure that their efforts to recruit more producers through their RFP process is successful. Next slide. So, of course, food safety is first, and everyone in DPS puts that front and center. So while farming school land in an urban setting does present unique food safety challenges, we know that DPS's pilot project is going to be really successful. They are doing all the steps to ensure that the outcomes will be to understand exactly what needs to be in place for food safety and to be efficient and effective in the way that they contract with their producers, and the work that Meg keeps doing for the community grows and is more and more successful every year. So with that, I'm going to end it, and we have a few minutes for Q&A.
Great, thanks, Lynn, and we've had some good questions come through. I see that Ann's just responded to one in the chat box, and there's been a little bit of a conversation going on there as well. But we do have another question. Are the safety protocols you put into place acceptable in lieu of GAP certification? So I know that GAP was mentioned as sort of a model, and wondering if maybe, I'm not sure, probably all of you could speak to this question, but it came through when, Ann, you were presenting on your protocols.
Right. So as far as GAP certification, I mean, this is something we've discussed going down that road, but you know, it's not a requirement at this point for all our farmers to be GAP certified. Certainly, we're very concerned about food safety, and we want to make sure that we meet those requirements, but we are really looking to do that through our USDA Farm to School grant and working with CSU Extension, and really looking at minimizing as many of those risks as we can, but we're not at the point where we're going for GAP certification yet. That may be something we do in the future, but at this point, we really want to have good protocols in place that address those concerns like hygiene and proper sanitization of the harvest tools and harvest containers and that sort of thing.
Okay, great. And then it looks like a follow-up question. The reason I ask is that our schools all tell us that they can't buy from any farms that aren't GAP certified. I think the school legal department requires it.
Okay, so in Denver Public Schools, we require our farms to have some sort of HACCP or GAP plan, but they don't have to be GAP certified for us to buy from them. Other districts require different things, but that is not a requirement for us.
And can I
okay, great.
Yeah.
Please do. Yeah.
So this is Lynn. So in our food safety project that we did, one of the things that we figured out was that for the state of Colorado, that kind of requirement was not necessary. The Public Health Department does have a lot to say about food safety, but our farms do not have to be GAP certified. So having said that, I think the question to get to your answer on that is really a matter of finding out from your Department of Agriculture, your State Department of Agriculture, and your State Health Department whether or not GAP certification is required. And the reason I say that is because in our project, we did learn that there was a lot of confusion among the different layers of actors that were involved in food safety. And so we did have local food public health officials who believed that certain standards had to be in place, certain requirements, and that turned out really not to be the case. So it could be misinterpretation or just misinformation, or they're being very, very conservative. So I would look to your laws.
Great. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Anne, as well, for answering that. So I think that we've gotten to, through either the chat box or through discussion, we've gotten to all the questions. I have put up the panelist contact information here if you do have follow-up questions. We also will be posting the resources along with a recording of this web forum to our website. And again, here's some more resources, so we will be posting these. I want to thank all of you for taking the time today to join us for this fourth and final in our Healthy Farms, Healthy People Farm to School Month Food Safety series. And I want to particularly thank our panelists here today, the Spark Policy Institute, Sprout City Farms, and Denver Public Schools, along with Colorado Farm to School Task Force, for giving us all of this great information. I hope that this has given everybody good ideas about what you can do in your own district. I think it's been very inspirational, and hope that you'll join us for future events and information, and let us know if you're doing similar things in your district. So thanks, everyone, and have a fantastic day.